I'm a wife, mother of 4 little children, 9, 7, 4, and 1, who I've left back at the hotel with my husband. Don't know how he's surviving. And I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. As you saw the statistics throughout these displayed signs, 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused by the age of 18. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be abused by the age of 18. 90% of the time, children are being sexually abused by someone they know and trust. And that was the situation in my life. I went off to kindergarten and met my best friend. Her name was Ashley. Ashley lived just up the street from me. We joined Daisy Scouts together, and soon Ashley, towards the end of kindergarten, is asking me to have a sleepover. Well, I had never slept anywhere besides relatives' homes, but I was excited. Mom said, if you get homesick, just pick up the phone, we know where she lives, we'll come get you. That night, we watched Little Mermaid, played in her bedroom with her big dollhouse, and eventually, like 2 little kids, grew tired and fell asleep. Ashley's life was a little different than mine. Ashley came from a home where Dad wasn't in the picture. It was just Mom's 2 children, and there was a male living in the home, and it was Ashley's uncle. He played the caretaker role. Anytime I was over there playing at Ashley's house, it was always the uncle home while Mom worked. Well, this night, I woke up in the middle of the night to that uncle coming in to the bedroom. And you all know where this story is headed. Yes, this man, for the very first, not last time, sexually abused me and told me to keep it a secret. So when my mom picked me up the next morning, did I tell anybody? No, I stayed silent. I didn't tell my best friend. But when she had asked me to spend the night again, of course, I said no. I was terrified of this man. At the same time in kindergarten, I had the local police officer come in and teach us about strangers. Don't answer the door when your parents are gone. Don't take candy from a stranger. And that's what they showed us in the videos. But the reality is, 90% of the time, it is someone the child knows, trusts. And in this case, it was the me. Fast forward, I'm now a first grader. Ashley and I are in the same class. I continue to play at our house because the uncle during the day was always outside sleeping. It was at night when we would see him come home. So I avoided the overnights. Well, this particular one afternoon, as I'm playing in Ashley's back bedroom, that uncle of hers appeared at the door after Ashley had gone to use the bathroom, locked it, and I am now clutching these 2 dolls because I know what this man is capable of. Calling me over to the bed, my best friend is now trying to get in. I can hear him jiggling the door. And to spare you the details, proceeds that just right before I turned 7 years old, raped me. I can tell you the color shirt this man was wearing, the shoes I wore that day, and one of the last things he said to me is, I know where you live, I will come get you. These were the only things where I was being taught, being threatened to stay silent. Are you wondering, were there any red flags? Well, yes, I started having all these behavior problems, acting out. 2 weeks after this whole assault had happened, I'm being babysat by my grandparents. My older sister's there, and she pulled my shoes off the same exact way this man had done 2 weeks earlier. And I suddenly went from sitting in Grandma and Grandpa's house to reliving that whole assault over again in my head. I'm now freaking out, having this total meltdown tantrum at 7 years old. Go to the back window that led to the backyard, and I'm banging on it so hard, my hand went through the window. My grandfather's now rushing me to the emergency room, going into emergency surgery, and all I'm thinking about is how much trouble I'm going to be in for the window. When I eventually made it back to school with my pink cast, social workers, psychologists, teachers were sitting down with my parents trying to talk about my behavior problems. They put an IEP in place, individual education plan. Some kids is for learning disabilities. For me, they labeled me a behavioral emotionally disturbed child because of my behavior problems. They put goals in place. Erin will find 3 proper ways to deal with her anger. but no one was getting to the root of why I was having all these behavior problems. Well, fast forward, now I'm 8 years old, once again in Ashley's house. Went in one day to grab some water, and as I'm about to make my exit to go back outside and play, as I tried to avoid the inside of that house as much as possible, this uncle of hers once again locked me now, not my best friend's room, but his room. And as I'm sitting there panicking, terrified because of what this man had done, begging him, please let me go home. I'll do anything, just please let me go home. This man proceeded to stand up, grab his pocket knife, and I can still describe to you what this knife looked like, put my hand as I'm sitting on his bed over the wooden part of this knife and telling me, this will hurt you a lot more than I will, and proceeded to once again rape me. So how did my abuse finally end? No, it wasn't that police officer coming in teaching me how to speak up and tell when you're being sexually abused. No, my parents put our house for sale, and we moved to a new neighborhood, a new school, and I never saw Ashley again. Well, as I made new friends in my new school, as you probably can imagine, they started asking me to have overnights. Well, as that now 9-year-old, I'm terrified of the uncles, the dads, the brothers, the you name it, any male that lived in the world. I trusted nobody. So I said no to all the overnights and always wanted them at our house. Well, fast forward a couple of years later, I am now 11 years old, spending the night in my grandparents' condo in Wisconsin. I'm there with one of my sisters, several of my older cousins. I was the youngest, they were all teenagers. They went to go walk around the town, Grandma blew up an air mattress, and I fell asleep on the floor. Well, once again, just like when I was that little 6-year-old, I'm now 11, waking up to being sexually abused once again. This time, someone I trust even more. He was like the brother I never got, coming from a family of 3 girls. I woke up to my older teenage cousin who lived down the street from me, sexually abusing me, pulling his hands out of my pants. The next morning, I tried to convince myself he didn't do this. This was all some horrible nightmare. Tried avoiding eye contact, but when I got home that night, I opened up my little pink childhood diary, and I wrote the words, something happened last night, but I don't know who to tell. Several months would go by, and nothing had happened. I have now convinced myself it was all some horrible dream, because I had seen my cousin multiple times since that first incident. I am now 12 years old, and I had to pass their house every day on the way to the elementary school. My aunt stops me, this cousin that abused me, and asks me if I could watch her 2 youngest sons. This was the first time she ever asked me. I said, sure. She was just running 30 minutes to go pick up some ingredients for dinner at the grocery store. So as I sat and played hide and go seek with my 3 and 6-year-old cousin, suddenly that cousin of mine appeared coming in through the garage door, saw what I was doing, and said, Erin, I've got the best hiding spot for you. Come with me, and my brothers will never find you. So I followed him, and we started to go down the stairs, and all of a sudden that gut feeling that something bad is about to happen, I felt it, the hairs on my back. It's something I tell kids all around the world to listen to that gut feeling, because if something doesn't feel right, probably isn't. This cousin led me into their crawl space, where he grabbed a bunch of blankets that had all their holiday decorations stored down there, got on top of me, sexually abused me. And it wasn't until we heard his mother opening the garage door that he said to me, this is our little secret, don't tell anyone. You will destroy our family. So of course, the only education I'm getting is to keep it a secret. So I went back to that little pink diary and started to write about what this cousin had continued to do. And suddenly my aunt is now asking me frequently to babysit, watching her boys while she ran errands, met up with friends. The abuser cousin was always over at a friend's house, hockey practice, was never around until his mother would leave, and suddenly he would come back from practice. His best friend lived across the street. He would see his mom leave, and he would come home and find ways to trap me in bedrooms, basements, closets, crawl spaces, you name it, sexually abuse me and threaten me each and every time. You will destroy our family, Erin. You have no proof that I'm doing this to you. So I continue to believe these lies, and suddenly now it's happening in the presence of 40 other relatives gathering for the holidays who have no idea what's going on in the garage, in an upstairs bedroom at another relative's home, on Christmas Eve, on Thanksgiving, on the family birthday party for Grandpa. All these different situations, he found ways to isolate me, abuse me, and silence me. So how did this abuse finally end when I was 13 years old? Well, at that same time, that police officer that had taught me all about stranger danger is teaching us DARE, the 8 ways to say no to drugs. I still have my DARE card, and I bring it from one state after another across this country. And I hold up that DARE card and I tell these legislators, I learned the 8 ways, as the card says. 8 ways on how to say no to drugs. But where are the 8 ways on how to get away until today? We don't teach kids that. I knew not to give into the peer pressure of the drugs, of the alcohol. But the only message I got as a kid was not how to speak up and tell, it was how to be quiet and not speak up when I was being abused. So at 13 years old, spring break, walking up the street, and my 11-year-old sister blurts out the words, "Brian's gross." Well, that's all she had to say, and I stood there in the street, shocked, thinking I was his only victim. But I'm going to tell you, you know anything about predators, and I know many of you in this room do, if they're doing it to one child and getting away with it, it is very likely they're doing it to other children. So now I have my sister coming to me, and I knew, but with her coming forward, as angry as I was, maybe somebody would believe us. We told our parents the next day. As you can imagine, with many parents, they were devastated, horrified. My dad came home from work. First thing he said to me when he walked into the kitchen, "Erin, why didn't you tell me he was doing this to you?" And I looked at him and I said, "Dad, because he told me you and everybody else would not believe me." My mother was bawling all day. There was no way I was about to say, "Mom, Brian's not the only one. This was going on when I was 6, 7, and 8. You know, when I put my hand through the window, all the behavior problems I had, I mean, they made me repeat first grade because of how bad issues I was having at that time in my life." So I kept that still a secret, and soon my father is now walking over to his sister's house, confronting her, letting her know what we have just disclosed. As you can imagine, she was shocked. She talked to my cousin Brian, and just as he told me, he denied it, called us liars, said he never did anything, and he was sticking to his story. My parents just wanted him to get help. They weren't looking to have him locked up. They just wanted to make sure that he did not repeat this again. Why did he do this? Well, my aunt and uncle wouldn't work with my parents. So after my mom made numerous phone calls to law enforcement trying to decide what to do, eventually my mom sat down with my sister and I and said, "We're going to have to go talk to some people about what Brian did to us." One of the first things was I'm thinking I'm going to speak to a police officer. And all I'm thinking is, am I going to be interrogated? Are they going to try to figure out if I'm telling the truth or not? What if they don't believe me? I was upset. I told Mom, I told you, why do I have to tell anybody else? Well, the place that we were going to was not a police department to talk to a police officer. No, I found myself a few weeks later brought to a place like Davis House, the Children's Advocacy Center in the suburbs of Chicago. I walked into that place with all this fear and anxiety. Filled with shame, I didn't want to talk about what this cousin of mine had done. I sat there in that waiting room, dreading the entire day, could not wait to be out of there. Soon an advocate arrives, takes my mother into her room, and is talking to her, and I can hear my mother sobbing, saying she failed her children, she missed all the warning signs. Well, then, after she came back into the room, the next woman appeared. Her name was Megan, and she was the forensic interviewer. She said because I was the older sister, if I would come with her first to talk, and then she'd come back with my little sister, who was sitting next to me very nervous about also being there. And I'll never forget that long walk down the hallway, all of the stuffed animals on the floor that she told me when we left I could take one home. Told me to choose what room I wanted to be in because she wanted to make this as most comfortable knowing how traumatic of a situation that I was about to talk about with. So I went into this room and started talking to her, still not trusting this woman, fearing, is she on my cousin's side? Is she on our side? What if she doesn't believe me? Am I going to be in trouble? Because this is stuff that I had always been told growing up. I'll come get you, no one will believe you, I know where you live. Well, I soon, the more I talked to this woman, I realized she was on our side. She was supporting me. I suddenly started feeling more comfortable sharing these details with her. She told me she believed me. She told me my cousin would never hurt me again. And the last question she asked me is, what do you want to happen to your cousin? And I'll never forget it. I told her, I just want him to get help so he never does this to anybody else. I don't want anyone else to ever experience what he had done to me and my sister. I met my little sister in the hallway, and I looked at her as she's sitting in that waiting room. These people are on our side. We have nothing to be worried about. Well, next day, that detective who was sitting on that two-way mirror watching my interview called my cousin into the police department. My aunt and uncle were convinced he was going to continue to deny it, but to all of our shock and surprise, he confessed. He was put under arrest. Now my parents had a decision to make. Do they take this to trial, or do they go the original path and just get him the help that they wanted to get? Well, they went that path because then my sister and I would not have to take a stand against him. My parents thought that would traumatize us even more. I'm still keeping what happened when I was 6, 7, 8 secret. And we just wanted to move on with our lives and begin the healing process. Well, my parents stuck us in family therapy. They found a therapist just for each of us to see individually. I didn't want to talk about this in front of my parents, and I didn't want to talk about it just with this woman that I didn't know who she was. I just wanted it to go away. But something to know as any survivor, and I know there's plenty in this room, it doesn't just go away. You carry it the rest of your life. Well, I was having nightmares, flashbacks, therapy was not working. Finally, several months after our interview, my parents called the Children's Advocacy Center and said, is there any way you can help her? We can't get her to talk to a therapist. She won't talk in family therapy. Is there anything else we're missing that can help her because she's so severely depressed? Well, they just happened to say next month there's a girls group starting for survivors of abuse. Maybe if she's in a room with other girls that can relate to her, maybe that'll help her start talking and healing from her experiences. Well, they were spot on, because it was in that room that I finally started to realize my closest friends didn't get it. But I'm now in a room of a bunch of girls that completely understood what I had done, understood the nightmares, understood the flashbacks. They got me. Whereas I said, majority of my other friends didn't. One even said, you're not being abused anymore. Shouldn't you be over this? And I don't blame her because she didn't understand. You've never walked in the shoes of an abuse survivor, what it does to your life, even long after you're not being abused anymore. But it was through the Children's Advocacy Center that I like to say laid the foundation of my healing. Made me feel supported, loved, that I did not get from my extended family, who even after my cousin confessed, continued to disown us and support the perpetrator. Well, not only did they provide services for me in a girls group, they provided a girls group for my younger sister, and they also had a parent support group because, like many parents, my parents were blaming themselves. They were beating themselves up. Why did I not see the warning signs? They helped prepare them for what the journey will look like as your children get older. How this, things might be okay for a few years and how this might impact them when they're, in their late teens. What to, as they told me, what to expect as you go on in life in dating relationships, trust issues, intimacy, having children. All these things they covered, and I can still remember all of those topics and gained so much information from it. But what I really gained from the CAC was reclaiming my voice and deciding, as I move forward in my life, wanting to put a face and voice on this silent epidemic. As I went through my high school years, I went down a path of, self-destructive, self-harm, suicide attempt, had a lot of anger and rage at that cousin of mine, and nobody still knew what happened when I was 6, 7, and 8. It wasn't haunting me, so I figured if I didn't talk about it, it would just stay away. Well, I realized those skeletons in your closet will eventually make their way in the front of your face, and it wasn't until I got to college that happened. But backtrack to high school, I had so much anger and hatred towards that cousin of mine that a therapist told me, Erin, you need to write a letter of what you would say to your cousin if you could say it to him today. Because I felt like he got away. He was given 7 years probation, which ended up getting reduced down to 6 months. He had a city councilor a few times. I pretty much felt that my sister and I did not get the justice that we deserved. So I wrote that letter. She told me to bring it back. She thought maybe this would be very therapeutic for me to get my anger and hatred out. When I wrote that 5-page letter, I thought, she doesn't need to read this, he does. So I looked up his email address. He's away at college. I clicked send at the end of the night. If you were to read it, which you could if you were to read my first book, you would not think I would get a response. But 5 days later, I did. I got 5 sentences to my 5 pages, but it opened up this door of communication, and for the next 7 months, we went back and forth. Me asking him, were you abused? Wanting him to understand and feel like a horrible person for what he did to me. What I did not see when this whole door of communication began was that it was going to end with him writing me a letter saying I'm sorry and me making the decision to forgive him and wanting to put a face and voice on this silent epidemic. So just before I graduated high school, almost 20 years ago, that little pink diary that I had written about so much abuse, I turned into my first book called Stolen Innocence. Word for word, the details of my life from 10 and 11 before my cousin abused me. I didn't start writing in this diary until I was 8. To suddenly all the horrible secrets I was keeping, and then all of our letters. Some would ask me, did you do this revenge, getting back at your cousin? No, I changed his name, and the whole purpose of writing the book and publishing it was to put a face and voice on this, and my hope to reach other survivors to understand you have nothing to be ashamed of, wanting them to have the courage to come forward and let go of some of this guilt that so many survivors feel, this blaming themselves, and the shame is huge. Wanting to give them a voice because it is such a silent epidemic. Well, I would go on, finally make it to college. Suddenly what happened in 6, 7, and 8 is now haunting me. I am now eventually disclosing to my parents, finding myself in my hometown police department, talking to a detective who goes searching for this rapist, and to my shock and surprise, he was still living at Ashley's house. And during the middle of the day, when law enforcement knocked on the door to pay him a visit, what was he doing? The same thing he did during the day all those years later. Ashley answered the door and said, well, he's asleep. Do you want me to wake him? No. Handed him the business card and said, can you please have him call me? Well, I know that tipped him off. When Ashley told her mom, who I would talk to later, she was shocked, horrified when she found out. She kicked her brother out that night and 100% supports me. Didn't get the support like that from my dad's family. Her brother refused to cooperate with law enforcement, and because so much time had passed, it was a he said, she said, no physical evidence, it wasn't going to go anywhere. I was just grateful that this man never had a family of his own, didn't have children, and since coming forward, I've been told he's a man that is in very poor health, lives on disability, and so, as his sister said to me once, I feel like he's being punished now, all these years later, with all his health problems as a result of what he put through. Well, moving forward with my life, went back and looked in that childhood diary, and one day read a passage that said, Officer Friendly came in and taught us not to answer the door, not to talk to strangers, but they don't warn us about our own family. And that message struck me. I thought, they don't talk about this. We don't educate kids on this, but we teach tornado drills, bush drills, fire drills. Those are all things mandated. We teach DARE, internet safety, bullying intervention, suicide prevention. Now, sadly, we do all these lockdown drills because of active shooters. But when it comes to talking about sexual abuse, we live in a society that wants to look the other way and act as if it's not going on. But it is a huge epidemic. You heard the statistics. 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys. So I reached out to my state legislator and I said, I want to get a law passed requiring that we teach kids every year personal body safety. Safe and unsafe touch, safe and unsafe sleepers, age appropriate, giving kids the voice that I never had as a kid so that they speak up and tell. My state legislator said, Erin, this is going to be really difficult, but we're going to make an attempt. You're going to have to testify. Well, over the course of 3 years, it took quite a while dealing with legislators. We eventually got it passed in my home state of Illinois, requiring that we teach this once a year. But kids are not just being abused in Illinois, they're being abused around this world. So I resigned from my full-time master's level counseling job. I was working with youth and decided to make it my mission to get it passed in all 50 states. And I love when I travel to a state that has passed it, like Tennessee. There are currently 38 states that have passed my law, with just 12 remaining. I can say you live in a state with legislators that really care about kids, because when I came here in 2014, 6 months pregnant with my first one, got up there with Representative White and testified, and there was no issues passing that bill, and I loved it when a girlfriend I went to high school with had her kids in Illinois schools. She moved a couple years ago to Tennessee, and within a month of living here, she's sending me a screenshot picture of the letter saying Erin's law is being taught in their Tennessee school district later that month. But every state has not been as easy as Tennessee, and New York killed my bill for 7 years. I kept coming back to these legislators telling them, you will not get rid of me. There are children in your state right now that you are failing, that are being silenced the same exact way I was, that need to know how to speak up and tell. And continue to pester them. And one thing politicians don't like is when you put negative media on them. So I started going to the national media, talking about how New York legislators are failing these kids. Eventually, the woman that was making it so difficult and killing my bill every year from having a hearing ended up being off the education committee. And finally, in 2019, Erin's law passed. In 2020-2021 was the first year that Erin's law was mandated in New York. And a children's advocacy center in upstate New York went in to teach Erin's law, much like what Davis House does in a lot of the schools, going in and teaching the prevention programs to educate these kids. It was their very first time in the school because the law had just been rolled out, and that very first lesson, 9 children came forward saying they were being sexually abused in one elementary school. And all 9 of these boys were saying the same man was doing it, the principal. In the state that killed the bill for 7 years, and in the first lesson in elementary school, this principal is being arrested after he's been in the school district for 15 years, and I looked at my husband that night, you know what I told him? I said, oh no, I know what this is like, I know the statistics. If he's doing it to 9 kids, he's done it to dozens more than that if he's been in this school for 15 years. When it finally went to trial, 26 victims, all boys, got on the stand and talked about how the Lunch Buddies program the principal had created, only inviting boys to have lunch with the principal, and how he would sexually abuse them during lunch, pull out his little drawer of trinkets and give them toys as he sent them back off to class. And it was during the Erin's Law presentation, principal tried to disrupt the entire thing as the teacher got on the stand and discussed. One little boy put his head on the table and started to cry. And that's when they knew something was wrong, and finally everything started to get disclosed. And I can tell you last November, this principal was sentenced to 62 years in prison. And that is just one case alone that I can explain to you of why I am so passionate about what I do. And I know this might be hard to wrap your head around this, but if given the option to say that I can change my past and none of that abuse ever happened, I wouldn't. Because I know there's been such a more positive impact that has come from what I endured. I'll live with the nightmares, PTSD, whatever comes with it, to know all of the kids that will be saved as a result of this law. I could show you dozens of articles of across this country of kids coming forward after being taught this. But even more importantly than just that is seeing and supporting the work that children's advocacy centers do. I credit everything with having the ability to stand up here and speak to all of you and having that courage and no shame as a result of going through Children's Advocacy Center. The man in Alabama that was the genius behind creating the very first one, I can't applaud more because there's over 900 of these centers across America. I've spoken at 300 of them. And my goal is to open people's eyes up to the amazing work that they do for kids because all their services are free. We never got a bill for a year and a half that the Children's Advocacy Center helped us. Provided all these therapeutic services, helped our family out, and they help millions of children around this world and never charge them a penny. But none of that would be possible if it weren't for people like you in this room who generously give to help these kids find the path to healing, find their voice, and get the follow-up care that they all deserve. So it is my hope tonight, hearing my message, that you will continue to support the Children's Advocacy Center. Help kids just like I was as that once little kid that walked into the CAC. Make a gift in their name of a child that will get the same services that I got as a kid, that you can now provide, paying it forward. Because if there's any organization, and I know there's bazillions out there, that you could support, I would say it's the Children's Advocacy Center that is the best. And it comes with the most incredible people that work behind the scenes. Because if you heard the horror stories, you heard a little of mine tonight, day in and day out, what a hard job it is to hear these cases, take them to trial, and take these families through this journey. That the one thing that all of you in this room can help them out the most with is continuing to give. And next year, bringing someone that knows nothing about the Children's Advocacy Centers. Open up someone else's eyes and get them introduced to what the CACs do for kids. Because before CACs, children walk to police departments. And the only one that should be interviewed in a police department are the ones that are hurting our kids. So thank you for being here tonight and supporting the Children's Advocacy Center.